If you would like to use data from your Documate workflows to create or update Google Contacts, you can do this in Zapier. So here we're in the Zap editor inside of Zapier, and I'm going to choose Documate as my trigger. So here in this trigger step, I'll choose Documate, and I'll choose Workflow Completed as my trigger event. I'll connect my account and then choose the workflow that I would like to use. Here, I want to create new contacts in Google Contacts based on entries in my intake form. So I'll select this workflow. And after we test this trigger, we'll continue to the action step. And here we'll select Google Contacts as our application. And for the action event here, I'm going to choose to create a contact. You can choose any of these others. You can also update a contact or add a contact to a group, for example, but here I'll choose to create. And once I've connected my account, I can set up the action. So here I know that I want to assign the first name, last name, and email address that are entered in my Documate workflow to fields in the Google Contact. So I'll click in this field for first name, and I can browse or search all of my Documate variables. So I'm going to choose the first name variable here. I'll do the same thing for last name. And for the client's email address as well. I'll set this always as the client's work email. And then once I've mapped all of these fields, I'll click continue, test the action step, and then I can turn my Zap on. Now, when I run my workflow and enter all of this information about my client, I'll see that after I complete my workflow, if I come into my Google Contacts account, this new contact, as entered in my Documate workflow, has been created. You may want to follow a very similar process, but instead of just creating one contact per workflow, you may want to create a new contact for every entry in a repeating item. You can do this using Looper with Zapier. So here we'll set up our trigger step exactly as we did in the first example. So we've chosen Documate and Workflow Completed as our trigger app and trigger event. We've connected our account and chosen our workflow name and tested the trigger. Then for the second step here, we're going to choose Looper by Zapier as our app. And what this is going to do is it's going to run the action of creating a new Google contact for each entry in the repeating item. For the action event here, we're going to choose create loop from text. And then we'll leave all of these as is. So we'll leave the text delimiter as a comma. We'll leave trim white space to true. We'll start our count at 1. And then if you would like to only run this loop a certain number of times, so you would only like to create a contact from the first 5 entries in your repeating item, for example, then you would enter that maximum number in this field. So if I only wanted 5 contacts max per workflow, I would say 5. But if you want it to run for as many entries as there are, and you don't think there will be more than, say, 500, you can leave it at 500. Then we're going to come back to this values to loop. And these fields are essentially equal to a variable name field, as in Documate, and a value field. So here we're going to choose the data from Documate that we want to assign to our contact for each repeating item. So in my intake workflow, I have a repeating item called investors. I want to create a contact for each of those investors that are entered in my workflow. So I'm going to look through my data here from Documate, and I'm going to see these are all of the attributes of my investor repeating item. So I have data, investors, which is the repeating item name, and investor name, which is the repeating item questions variable name. I'll choose the investor name from the repeating item investors, and I'm going to assign it a variable name. So here I'll just say investor name, and then I'm going to repeat this, add more items for each of the items from Documate that I would like to add to my contact. So I'll search again here for investors. I'm also going to include their address here. And again, I'll give it a variable name, investor address, and I'll include their phone number in the contact as well. And again, variable name, we'll call it investor phone. Once I've set this up, I'll click continue and I'll test this step. So I can see here, these are the values that we're going to loop. the investor name, which is text, the address, which is text, and their phone number, which is a number. Click continue and test the Zap. And then we're not going to turn on the Zap yet. We're going to add a third step here. So here is where we'll add our Google Contact step. We'll choose action event, create contact. We'll connect our account and then we'll set up the action. Now to map these fields in my contact, I'm going to click in the field. I'll skip over the data from Documate. We want this information to be entered for every single entry in the repeating item. So we'll come to this create loop from text step. We'll skip these preview values and we'll click show all options. And then we can find the values that we created in the previous step. So for the name, I want that investor name variable that we created. So I'll click investor name. I'll come down to the phone number and do the same thing. So create loop from text so that we're using our looped variable, show all options, and then investor phone, which is the variable name that we assigned earlier. And same thing for the street address. So create loop from text, show all options, and investor address. Once I've mapped all the fields I would like to, I can click continue, make sure that my test was successful, and then I can turn on my Zap. Now for every entry in my investors repeating item in my workflow, I'll see a new contact come through to Google Contacts.